The greatest power you possess is your ability to choose. Join Lowe's Moore as he reveals how you can begin to maximize that power by exploring yourself on the deepest levels and committing to making lasting and positive changes. Get ready to achieve breakthroughs that will lead to accelerated growth and transformation, because you are now tuned in to the Blueprint.
Good evening and welcome back to the Blueprint with Lowe's Moore. Excited about, I'm always excited about each show. The guests have been awesome. And also, all of you have been amazing too, tuning in and, during the time that we're having the show. And then even after the show is over, you guys are still reviewing the last shows and shows in the past. And like I like to do each week is, this is my pebble, right? And, they say that if you throw a pebble in the pond, you get a ripple effect. And so each week I drop this pebble. It's really not a pebble. It's like a little miniature basketball. And, I was a former basketball player, so I don't know anything other than, use a basketball, drop that pebble into the pond, and we're expecting the ripple effect of the show each week. Really, really, really excited about tonight. I think this is, in the space that we're in the time that we're in, my guest tonight, we'll learn about her, and also, about some things that have to do with, our mental side, our mental health, and also in the way we think. And so it's been somewhat over the last couple of weeks. I lost like a little brother to me, a young man that I had the opportunity to help. And over the years, when he was a little kid, he used to hang out with my brothers, hang out at the house. When I used to come back home, when I was playing with the New Jersey Nets, he was always there. He ended up, getting COVID, coached the game last week, went to sleep, did not wake up, 56 years old. So I want to pay tribute to my good friend, Coach Lou Hill, or we call Sweet Lou, and Sugar. Man, you're going to be truly, truly missed. The crazy thing is that a few months ago, my wife lost her 102 aunt to COVID, and that was devastating. And we went down to North Carolina, had the funeral, and one of her cousins who performed the ceremony ended up passing away yesterday. So it is a tough time. I mean, to be able to work, to be able to get up every day and watch the news. Man, news was crazy before the pandemic. The news is crazy while there is a pandemic. All the social justice issues. I mean, this is a time where you have to really guard your mind and guard your thoughts. Hopefully we will get into a little bit about that this evening, and hopefully it'll be beneficial to you. And I think this is going to be a very powerful show. It's going to be an amazing show. And I'm just excited about tonight. And, I'm excited about every day that God gives me on this earth. So stay prayerful, stay blessed. Again, thank you for your support. And I'm about to really actually get rolling here. And I want to start out with the book of the week. The book of the week is Black Pain by Terry M. Williams. Terry Williams was an amazing publicist. He had clients like Denzel Washington and Eddie Murphy and a number of other started the Terry Williams Agency, down in Manhattan. And Terry graduated from Mount Vernon High School. I knew her mother well. And later on in her years, she started to deal with the issues of depression. And she started to speak about it. She started to talk about it. And she wrote this book, Real Talk, Black Pain, because sometimes we just assume that, African-American people or people of color don't feel pain, or that, they don't have mental health issues. And Terry was bold enough to start talking about her, what she was experiencing and things she was going through. And she toured and took her books, in which I had an opportunity to read this book. And also inside the book, I read about Black men and depression. If you get an opportunity, you should pick this up. It's something that we do not talk about. We do not talk about what we think. We do not talk about the trauma we experience each and every single day. And it is just a wonderful book. And I thank Terry for being so candid and so transparent in the book. Also, there's a word of the week. The word of the week is fear. Earlier in my shows, I did one on faith, right? And I like to say this about this word. Man, this word is it could be a devastating, if you allow fear to control your life, right? To control your thinking, right? It could take you into multiple places. And let me say this about this word and the word faith. Faith and fear both attract. Fear attracts the negative, and faith attracts the positive. And so when you choose to get your mind on positive things, you can get a snowball effect. And then it can get bigger and bigger, and you become more positive and positive. But if you allow for fear to snowball, right, we can find ourselves in a place that we really don't want to be. We want to be in the light. We don't want to be in the darkness. So that's a very powerful word, fear. And then also this, Hill Harper and Pierce Harper, his son Pierce, was on the show, and they gave us a host of affirmation. And so we have the Hill and Pierce Harper affirmation moment. And it says, I live and walk by faith and not by sight. That is our affirmation moment. And so I want to get right into this, and we're going to start out with a video that we hope will set the tone for this evening's conversation with my guests. So we're going to see this. And hopefully, it will set the tone. And so here we go.
There are few groups who could stand to benefit from therapy more than Black people. I mean, think about all the things Black people have been through: slavery, segregation, winter, all equally traumatic experiences. But unfortunately, even as therapy has become more mainstream, the Black community has had a tough time getting the help that they need.
It's hard enough to get mental health treatment in the U.S., but studies show that racial and ethnic minorities are significantly less likely to receive mental health treatment than whites.
Black and Hispanic children are less likely to get mental health care than white kids. And studies show that irritability in the average white teenager is often labeled as depression. That same behavior is more likely to be seen as disruptive in Black or Latino children, and doctors say that can lead to feelings of hopelessness at a very young age.
Yes, one of the reasons many Black people don't get the proper treatment is misdiagnosis. What is seen as depression in white people can be seen as disruptive behavior in Black people. And this shouldn't be surprising, right? This kind of thing happens in medicine all the time, mixed diagnoses. It's like when a Black person has a seizure, it's a medical emergency. But when a white person does it, it's called dancing. But it turns out Even when black people are properly diagnosed with mental health issues, it can still be a challenge to find a therapist who's equipped to handle their needs.
Making the crisis worse, not enough African American therapists. Today, only 4% of psychologists are black.
Kevin Durden says admitting he needed help was actually easier than finding it. He saw 3 different therapists, but felt that none of them understood the stress and emotions unique to black men.
When Taraji P. Henson's own son, Marcel, was struggling, she found it nearly impossible to find him one.
Trying to find a culturally competent therapist was like looking for a purple unicorn with a gold horn.
Do they understand the cultural context from which I'm coming from? Do they understand the culture that I live in?
That's right. It's extremely difficult for black people to find a black therapist. And it's been like this for a very, very long time. I mean, that's why Martin Luther King Jr. was always describing his dreams to huge crowds. You know, it's just like, I had another dream that I'm being chased by bears in my underwear. Does anyone here know what that means? Now you may think that a therapist's race shouldn't matter at all. And that's true. But if you think about it, it does make sense. For many white therapists, no matter how good they are, it can be hard to understand the particular experiences of a black person. You know, just sitting there in a session, even if they're trying, it could be like, so you say people are following you around the store and you're invisible, but only to taxi drivers? Paranoid delusions. So when it comes to mental health, there's a very real struggle for black people to access healthcare, get diagnosed correctly, and find a therapist who can relate to them. But if that wasn't bad enough, there's another major hurdle stopping black people from getting therapy, and it comes from the black community itself.
We have a stigma in the black community when it comes to dealing with mental health.
Black students say where they come from, it's shameful to talk about anxiety, depression, and trauma.
It's not okay to have mental health issues, or like, that's a white people thing.
I've heard all the time, black men don't go to therapy, they go to the barbershop.
I told my own mother that I was seeing a therapist, and she said, you don't need to see a therapist. What you need to do is see a preacher.
You got Jesus.
Right.
You don't need anything else.
Right.
You know, just buck it up.
Yeah. That's a line every black person knows all too well. You don't need therapy, you need Jesus. And my response is always, why can't we use both? Because church is a great place for community, but therapy is great for one-on-one mental health needs. I mean, I bet Jesus himself wish he could have gone to therapy at times, you know? Just be like, so my best friend betrayed me, and I was born in a freaking barn, plus my birthday always falls on Christmas, so I only get one set of presents. It's so shitty. So yes, part of the problem is that there's a major stigma in the black community around therapy. And honestly, I can understand why many black people would rather deal with problems at church. It's a familiar place for us, right? You trust the people there, and it's also a fun atmosphere. Like, therapy doesn't seem fun. Church is cool. I get it. In fact, that's what I was thinking. Maybe that's one way we could try and help solve this therapy crisis. We need to make therapy a little bit more like black church. And I think it would be pretty dope.
Wow. So without further ado, I want to introduce my guest, Camille Banks Lee. Yeah. And I want to start out. Hey, Camille, how you doing?
Hey, good evening. How are you?
I'm good. I was thinking about what we had in common. I always think about that when somebody's on the show. What do we have in common? And we both dealt with young people.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah, you're executive director of the Youth Bureau in the city of Mount Vernon back in the day.
Yes.
And I was the executive director for the Boys and Girls Club, and we worked on helping young people, deal with the stress of life and hoping to help families help their children with the development of their life, which is an awesome thing. But before we started getting into all, the things that we probably need to start out with, but I want to know more about Camille. I mean, my wife just hollered out, "Hey, Camille, what's up?" So she just did a holler, shout out to you. And I want to say happy belated birthday, right?
I was celebrating the birthday of Toni Morrison. And a lot of people thought, because I was so excited about it, February 18th was her birthday. And she was born the same day as another great writer, Audre Lorde, who lived in Mount Vernon at one point. So I think I confused people because I was really excited about her birthday and I posted about it. And it's funny, your wife was one of the people that reached out to wish me happy birthday. But I did have a big, significant 50th in quarantine a couple of months back, and that was an odd way. But we have a lot of other things in common.
Okay.
In that we both I at least have 3 sons. You have 3 sons?
I have 2.
You have 2. So I knew I was going to say, and a grandson.
And a grandson.
And a grandson. I do not have any grandsons yet. But so the idea of being connected as community people who understand the pain and hurt. It's funny. This is dinner time. So when I was saying that I was doing this at 7:00, my husband was like, "You're going to miss dinner time." And I was like, it's a good reason that I'm not going to be around the dinner table at 7. We literally eat at 7, which is not Black usual time. I grew up eating at like 3:00 after church on Sunday, like early. But my husband, who had a very different family background, they ate around 6, 7. And so I have to give a shout out just to the idea of family, because Lowe's, being a family person, both you and your wife, it's hard being community people and family people. And I'll tell you why. Our kids probably always feel like they're competing with the idea that the community wants us and needs us and are connected. And then our own biological children are also sort of waiting for their time. And I'm sure you can probably identify with that, right? Are you coming to my game or their game? Are you going to participate with us? So, and I love that you brought Terry Williams in, because she was a very significant, she was a therapist even before she did PR, and using all of those skills, because that's one of the things about being people person, the idea of always helping people with what challenges them in whatever form that we use, whether we use prayer, whether we're using, psychotherapy, whether we're using sports, because all of those things are therapeutic. And we need those to be parents. We need those to be good friends. We need them to be good executive directors, to collaborate, to listen. But, and I don't want to jump around too much, but I love that clip, because one of the things that jumps out at me is the idea that we need to be relatable. That one of the reasons people don't want to go to therapy is it feels difficult. And nobody wants to do the difficult thing. We want to take the easy way out. And it's just not always that easy. And most people ask me, when is it time to see a therapist? How do I know? So I usually say it's when the thinking overtakes you, when it's something that distresses you and inhibits you from doing a good job. It stops you from sleeping well. It stops you from performing duties. If your anxiety or depression is hampering you from being a good wife, good husband, good friend, good teammate, because it's so heavy on you. And I'll use that young man Wheeler, who the football player who recently had do you know what I'm talking about? Domestic battery of the young woman. Bipolar, very clear about his issues. And the girlfriend mentioned that he cut his hair, which was a really big, significant thing. And she saw him spiraling, but nobody knew what to do.
Right.
Now, his is an extreme case. But what I say to people, if the distress is causing you to to not be able to be competent. And there's something about us that we feel we're supposed to handle everything on our own, right? So Lowe's, if you had if your weak shot, if your weak point was your 3-point shot, tell me what you would do.
I would definitely get in the gym and do something about it.
Right? You wouldn't just be hoping and wishing. You probably wouldn't even pray, say, God, man, I wish you could elevate my jump. I wish you, right? You wouldn't do that. You would actually exercise whatever it needed, go to the perimeter. And it's the same thing with mental health. I picked up a book. It's funny, I don't have in this office Terry's book, but one of the books I have, it was a psychotherapy with African-American women. And somebody, people always say to me, well, why is it different? Or how is it different with different race or different racial groups? Well, as your wife will say, most of us have learned, don't have that social worker call my office, right? I tell my kids, man, if the school calls me, right, there's going to be a problem, especially if it's the social worker or the counselor, because I'm thinking, what did you tell those people about what's going on in here?
True.
Right? And I think it starts there. We have this idea that we're supposed to carry our burdens on our own, instead of thinking in a team philosophy that there are different people that help us with different things, right? There are different people and I have to stay in my lane. It's something I wanted to say. So like social workers or case managers, very often they're dealing with the total person, and they might be dealing with housing issues. They might be dealing with scopes that are larger. So really when I'm working with psychodynamics, I'm working with what's preventing you from being your best. What's stopping you, whether it's fear about your future, whether it's sleeping too much. What are the issues that are stopping you daily and having a negative impact on school, work, and your relationships? And then how can we help develop to make changes that are going to not only help you cope, but are going to help you be your best self? And that's one of the things I love about Terry's book, because she talks about people being in pain and masking it with drugs, masking it with food, masking it with sex, masking it with all of the things that are helping us to numb, which are things that we're not always in touch with that we're doing. I don't want to over talk.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is, and usually when I start out and you start out with an important topic, which was family, and so being who you are now, right? And I know who I am now, right? When you think about family, right? You go back to, if you talk a little bit about, I could tell you about my experience dealing with domestic violence, all those kind of different things, and it was nobody there to tell me that I was in early childhood trauma. And it was like, you in trauma, So, all the things that were going on in your family, the history of your family, so forth and so on. So when growing up, mom, dad, talk a little bit about mom, dad, that experience, siblings, and then we'll just kind of move forward. Yeah.
So I grew up with a large extended family in Mount Vernon in a multifamily house on the South Side. And my parents divorced when I was about 4 years old. And we went to go back to live with my grandmother. And my mom had not had an education at the time. She probably would not want me telling her business in that way. Yeah. But she had to go back to school. And I remember they're not getting along, impacting. And my grandparents really picked up the slack in a lot of ways that Black families do. And they did a lot of interacting. So my brothers and I, we had to live with my grandparents, who lived in a house where my aunts and uncles lived. And so I felt loved and taken care of, but we were definitely not a silver spoon Definitely not. I felt like I wanted to have that traditional family where, I wanted, when I was a kid, it was like the Brady Bunch, right? They had a Brady Bunch, and then later on the Cosby family. But I wanted to create a different, for my own family. I remember my parents couldn't even speak to each other. I'm almost ashamed to say that, but my mother, was so angry with my father. And that impacted me and impacted the way I saw relationships. And I was thinking, did y'all ever love each other? Because, it was always having to go through grandmothers and having to go through other families. But that family structure around their brokenness, I think I learned a lot. And having a single mom growing up, I learned a lot about what I didn't want to be, what I didn't want was to raise. And I don't even know how my mom did it, but I know how she did it because she had a village, right? She had aunts and uncles and cousins and other people who came to my games and who could support me financially, who looked out. And I think that's the story of a lot of other people. But I think that set the framework for what I wanted to do differently for my family. And so I give all the praise to my grandparents who taught me about always doing my best. In fact, my grandmother would say all the time, she wanted me to be a Renaissance woman. So she would teach me how to cook. A little bit felt old timey because and my husband and my family can appreciate it now, but I had to stay in the kitchen and cook a lot. So I learned how to, snap beans and make all kinds of, I can cook anything, gravy, I'm sure I joke to this day that my husband will be like, he'll see me making pies or something and he'll be like, where's that pie going? Who like, where, because I'm always making something at a repast or doing things. Cause I grew up in a house where, also my grandmother was always doing for other family members, other people. So I always had extended family, somebody who was hard on the luck, somebody who was on drugs. And I think that created this community that I was always that it's never just you, always be looking out for other people.
Yeah. And then when you also connect that with, I heard you mention, like all of us, church.
Yes.
And how important in family and faith, how important is that in the process?
Lowe's, want to hear something funny?
Right.
My people made it so I had to go to church every Sunday. I had to go to Sunday school and then church. Then I would have to go to a Bible study. And it set a real tone in my family's expectation and gave me a foundation. And what was funny was I could go out, which was a little bit rare for other people, right? So I was on an honor roll and I was a cheerleader and I was a, senior class vice president. And I was very, into it. But she said, whatever you do, you got to go to church on a Sunday morning. I know you're going to be at church and Sunday school, right? And Sunday school, you had to know a Bible verse, right? My people that were in Sunday school would remember, and you had to do a different one than you did before. You'd have to memorize the Bible verse, right? And I'd have to wear stockings and a slip. And I'm just saying, like, you couldn't just, and my grandmother they would say, don't come to church all wrinkled up, looking like you better look as good going to church as you going anywhere else. And it really did set a foundation for me until I went to college. It was weird because then when I got to college, it wasn't enforced, but it was something that was in me. And I'm sure you can understand that.
It was innate.
It was an innate thing around, my grandmother, like I said, I give my grandmother a lot of credit because my mom was working and trying to figure things out. And so, she was in the senior choir. My grandpa, like I said, nobody was trying to hear me Like I could, he's like, do whatever you want to do, but you going to church Sunday, right? And me and my partner, who is still one of my best friends, Kaya Henderson, who became the superintendent in DC, she and I would, after Sunday school, we would go to the store, get a little candy, and sit in the back of church, right?
Yeah. No.
All the ushers knew us. You know what I mean? And it was a beautiful. I wouldn't trade it for the world, because it created an understanding around discipline, because I had to, that's what you did. I mean, my time was not my time from 9 to 2 on Sunday. So.
Well, yeah. And then the other thing is you transitioning from, the importance of family into the importance of faith, which in every family after that is education. I mean, so talk a little bit about, high school, leaving high school and kind of getting in what you thought was going to be your future.
I love that you're saying this. Lowe's, you didn't know this was going to happen. That's my high school. This is my high school, Mount Vernon High School. I don't know why I have it in my desk. That tells you, right? So I have Black Studies with Dr. Sproul was one of my right? So I literally have this in my very adult fancy desk with my degrees from Fordham and NYU and Columbia. But I have my Mount Vernon High School transcript here. And because I was trying to show my kids an example, because I had failed gym. And I'm sure people will know why. Why did I fail gym at Mount Vernon High School? Tell me why I failed gym.
You didn't go?
And I didn't go because I had in my senior year swimming first period. Why didn't I go? You married to a Black woman. Why did I not go to swimming first period PE?
Couldn't swim, couldn't get up.
Because I didn't want to get my hair messed up.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, I should have known that. We were on a trip, St. Thomas, St. Croix. And my wife was a speaker at an education program. And here we are, this blue sky, beautiful blue water. And I'm in the water just having a good time. My wife will not get in there because she was not getting her hair wet. I mean, I understand that clearly.
Right? And it's funny, right? Because I'm doing well. These are great, chemistry. I've got all these great sequential, like all these classes that I was involved in. But I almost failed out of senior year because I didn't want to get my hair wet first period at gym. I got a 68 in gym. I just made it. But I was showing this because I was talking to my sons about showing up. Is that sometimes you show up because you're supposed to show up, right? You do what you're supposed to do. And that when it's in divine, or it might not have been what I wanted to do, but I mean, I knew how to swim. I cared a lot about appearances because at that time I felt like it was going to mean a lot, and I remember, my mom being like, you gonna get in that water. You didn't come all this far to fail gym, right? Yeah. And so education, there was never a point in my life that it was ever discussed that I was not going to go to college. It was a non-negotiable. Now, in hindsight, it's what I wanted. I was a teacher for a long time before I switched careers. And I loved going to school. I still love going to school. But I feel like what they taught me was that I could do it. And the peers and the people in the neighborhood, in the South Side, like it was the expectation that I would be exactly who I would become. And that I would go to school and come back. And I appreciate that in a lot of ways. But I never really had I never thought that I would not go to school, or that I would not finish school or anything like that. It was an expectation, early on from my family about that.
Yeah. And I don't know why anybody would schedule for a Black woman first period swim. That's I see all the comments down there. My sister-in-law Deirdre, my wife, Marsha Blunt. I mean, I see all of us saying, saying the same thing.
Right?
Down here. Like, why?
Right? And the thing was, I played sports. So I want to be clear. I played volleyball. I was not like against sweating, but chlorine was a whole different monster, right? It was good, and it was first period. And I remember fighting about it. I remember, I would do it last period if I was going to go home, if I was going to get out of that. But I say that I think that the interesting thing about what we're talking about is I held on to it because I was showing. So whenever my kids think that I had some easy road, I want to show them that I had gotten 60s and that, that there were lots of things I struggled with, because I do think those, sometimes we only see the finished outcome, right? So people see Sean Patterson, or they see people who become great things. They see you made it to the NBA. They don't know all of the things that happened along the way to get you to where, I always tell the story about my husband is that he couldn't get a job at Blockbuster. These are true stories. Like the struggles that we've been through together are part of what's so funny to us about how anything happens, because I remember when, it was like nothing was happening for him. And even at different points, even as like things will go up and they would come back down. And if I would tell anybody, and even tell my own kids as they're struggling through this pandemic right now, it's not a straight line from right to success.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of dips. And there's going to be that we're going to have to adapt a lot. Yeah.
And I saw the young lady said, Karen said, I'm a white girl. First period, man. I that's not long enough to get my hair dry,
Right. Right. And I don't think, going back to the therapy comment, I don't think we take into account what that means. When I was a kid, it mattered. I thought people knew if I was repeating the same pants, right? Like I thought somebody was noticing that if I wore the same Lee jean, like if I wore those on Monday, right? And I had to wait like at least 8 days, or like I really thought people cared about me repeating my clothes. I thought people were going to laugh at me. Because the cafeteria can be one of the most terrorizing places in the entire, right? But like, and adults can understand that, because when you walk into a place that you don't know anybody, and people are just judging you, and that's what I was going to say about the hair. That's the first thing you see. My grandmother said they see you before they ever hear you, so you better look sharp. Because if you don't look good, they don't care about what comes out of your mouth. So if you look like a crumbled up piece of paper, so take that into consideration. So if I'm first period, I look wet, and I'm mad at that picture because I had just had, like, literally I'm nursing. My child is about a week old in that picture. And a troll. That picture. So no, I'm not exaggerating. My child is a week old, and I had some people mock me and make fun of me. This is a true story, and say that I should get a breast reduction. And I literally had my child a week later. But that's what happens when you open yourself up. So mind you, the same girl that's worried about being first period, going to second period, third period, and having to be in the cafeteria with messy hair is the same girl that's going to a premiere and having people say she needs some surgery. She don't look right.
Well, people don't care. They, again, you were just talking about, really is process.
Yeah.
We see the finished product, but we don't understand the process that gets us to the finished product.
That's right.
And so people didn't, they just see you in the picture, right? They don't know anything that happened before that, and they don't really care. Honestly, they just don't care, But and some people take that well, and some people don't take it well.
No, you're right. And it's sort of like, I laugh because when people say, my son right now, my oldest son is at Stop and Shop working. Literally, he's checking people out. People say, y'all got like, why is your son working at Stop and Shop? Because he needs a job, right? Because when I was in high school, I was working at Bill Johnson and Associates in Fleetwood, working on political surveys. And I say that example to say, is the work ethic that they don't know you, right? So if somebody knows you, they'll say, oh, Langston, I thought you, my son, they'll say, I thought you were at Georgetown. Well, he was, but right now he's at Stop and Shop on Palmer Road, checking people out until midnight, because it's the process, right? Because that process is going to teach him to value people, that people that work, that you don't just become whatever it is you decide. So Lowe's Moore, the blueprint, took a lot of years to become Lowe's Moore, right? Took a lot of years for me to say, I'm going to open a private practice. A lot of people said to me, keep working for an agency, do this. A lot of people said Black people are never going to come to therapy. It's the same thing that was talked about in that article. A lot of us want to stay in pain, but thankfully the insurance is the idea of it, though, is the world has changed a lot, and I'm willing to move with it, just like you. I mean, this podcast, I'm sure, came out of you deciding that you wanted to bring things to people that they wouldn't ordinarily see.
Oh yeah, definitely. Without a doubt. You have so many experiences, right? And the people that you interview have experiences too.
Right.
And again, everybody is looking at the finished product, right? And so when you bring somebody on, right, you realize that nobody lives a perfect life.
Right.
Right. And so when they come on, they got to go through process too. They got to fail. They got to see death. They got to see life. They got to see all these different things. And is the question on, how we deal with that. And then also, what is it that we want to accomplish? What is our purpose? What is our assignment? And so then we started thinking about that. When I was going through what I was going through between what was happening with my mom and dad, as a young man, right? The boys club and the game of basketball, right, was that vehicle that kept me, kept my mind, stable. It gave me purpose every single day to get up and go to school and get on that basketball court. I had a place to hide what I was feeling. And so, I mean, everybody's just seeing the finished product, but don't know that there is a blueprint that has to be created, as you go along if you want to be successful. And you know what? Ups and downs, positive and negative, come with that.
I love, it's funny. I was thinking about that. It's like, so we're all mapping out. I think you and I had a conversation earlier this week. And I said to you, it sounded funny, but I said, I always ask people, what are they looking forward to? Because we always need to have something aspirational to look forward to. And people usually make it like much bigger things. I can't wait to go to Hawaii. I can't wait till I, can buy this car or have this thing. And my big thing has always been, I'm going to have a bubble bath. Like, I can't wait, because a bubble bath is something that was attainable that I could do, right? And I don't know if you remember, I said to you, I'm going to, put a little food coloring in it. It's going to be blue. I'm going to put some salts in it, because it was something that I didn't have to wait for, but it's still that thing that, like, what are you looking forward to? It could be a new album. It could be somebody's sermon that you want to hear, but that you always have to have something to look forward to. So you getting on that court, I know when you touch the ball and the idea, you lose yourself in it, right? But that blueprint, we all need to have our own individual, what works for us, not even whether it's in your family, what works for you, but whether it's reading, we got to find that. That's a powerful thing. How are we going to map out for ourselves? So if I get my bath tonight, which I'm definitely going to do, I'm going to be zen, right? Because I like candles. This time I'm gonna put rose petals. I'm telling all my business, right? I'm gonna put rose petals from literally, because I don't lie, from the roses from last Valentine's, because it will feel special to me. And then what I feel in that moment is gratitude that God has given me another week, that I get to be in a bath, right? I remember one of the apartment I had, it was only showers. It was a stand-up shower was the only thing. But it's something that's just for you, right? Whatever that blueprint is.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing is, about a blueprint is not the final product. Right. And if you're building a home, you got to have a blueprint. You got to have a vision of what it is. Right. But everybody that knows about building a home, the blueprint is going to change. You're going to change that blueprint several times before you finally get down to the final, this is the master blueprint here, and we're going to go with this. And then it's still going to change. So, so that's the way life is. But you got to have the blueprint, because it gives you purpose, right? And it's the thing you're looking at to keep you moving forward. And that's why, and it was, Pauletta Washington, when Denzel and Pauletta did my forward for my book. Mm-hmm. And so she read the book, and she said that the book was a blueprint. That's how I came up with the name, the blueprint. It started with the book, and my book deals with illiteracy. My task, my issue was dealing with my problem with reading and reading comprehension, as a young high school kid. Mm-hmm. But I knew that I had to do something about that in order to become successful. So, for me, literacy is an important thing for me. Reading is an important thing I think that everybody should do, and everybody should master reading. And more importantly, we should learn to fall in love with it. And we see reading as a chore, as work, when we don't know how, when we can't do it, but once you learn, it becomes love.
You might have to come over to my house, right? I have a sixth grader. There's a true story. Just this week, I'm fighting with him about reading because he doesn't love it. It's not Malcolm husband. It is also not a love for him. And so he doesn't see. So I'm always, in fact, I'm reading Cicely Tyson's memoir right now. I loved reading. When I was a kid, the library, even though those, I don't know if you knew this, but I lived on 8th Avenue, but like very close to the Boys and Girls Club. So literally like through the parking lot, down the block, like right near the Boys and Girls Club. And I did not physically go into the Boys and Girls Club a day in my life as a teen. I didn't go into the Boys and Girls Club probably until I had a meeting with you, or to do something else in there much later in life, because I always felt like it was not necessarily for me, because that's where basketball players or a very specific thing did. But where I was every day was the library.
Wow.
Yeah. Every day. And the library was far, right? The library was really far from there. But I fell in love with different worlds. And I felt like I could get out of Mount Vernon. I could see what it was like. I really enjoy reading, and I still enjoy reading, but my sixth grader hates it. I'm like, kid, he's reading a book now. I made him read this book, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. It was a book I taught years ago. It's about kids and segregation. And he's like, he's like, you're killing me, Mom, right? He read a Spider-Man Miles Morales book, and I'm trying to make it fun for him. But what I don't want to do is torture him. But what you're talking about, your literacy, you're right. It was a way, if you didn't have it, it was going to be a stumbling block.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's sort of like once we figure out what our stumbling blocks are around what our challenges are, because I think I had said this to you before. Medication is not my thing. Even therapy is not necessarily. It's what's going to be your thing that's going to be effective to help you be your best self, to help you feel good about what you're doing. Because there's not one way to do this. It's not just prayer. It's not just therapy. I do strongly believe, though, in mind, body, spirit. So I try to move my body every single day. Because I feel like it connects me with gratitude, the fact that I can do it, right? I just got this new boxing thing. So anybody, if you follow me on Instagram, on Facebook, they'll know I love my Peloton, but I just got this other, because I am in love with the idea of being a boxer. I know it's too old, but it's about aggression. And it's for one of the things I was trying to work with kids on. So a lot of kids are angry. And if you hit the bag and you all the stuff that you're getting out, I'm telling you, more women. There's a lot of angry women. Women don't want to admit this. I probably shouldn't say this on the show, but if it's better than a glass of wine. If you hit that bag, you hit ones and twos. You in there, right? Because you're fatigued, but you feel great. Because there's a lot of things that we have to stomach. A lot of things that we have to swallow, all of us, on a daily basis. And I found that boxing, but movement, because it connects you to your mind, your body, and your spirit of what, keep pushing, keep moving on,
Yeah. And it was something I seen on, we put up a couple of things here. Hey, wellness tips for mental wellness. Here's some self-care tips. You'll see them pop up from every now and then this evening. And, I seen, I think it's one on the morning news where it says that America sits too much. We just sit. We don't get up and move enough. And the body's not made for sitting.
Absolutely.
Right? It's not made for laying down. Right. And so you got to get up and move. And that's why I used to tell my mom, being in this pandemic, right, there's nowhere to go. She's not going to go outside. So I used to tell her, like, every hour and hour, just stand up, just you stand up, walk around the kitchen and come back and sit down. I mean, you just got to stay active, and it causes your mind to shift too as well.
Does your mom like music? Because one of the things I've told people is if you could connect it to something that you like in other words, if she played a song every hour on the hour, because music has a way of connecting us. Me and my husband fight to get in the gym in the morning. So it's a joke about that. Like, not the kids, but we are very dedicated to sing every day. And in fact, we're on a challenge right now. And I want to say I'm the more competitive one. I send him notes like, come on, bro, you gotta step it up. But it asks you in the Apple Watch challenge. So you have to stand up, you have to, do a certain amount of minimums. But it really is thinking your body, and to your mom. That's why I said if she liked the song, she could do it with a song that she was going to almost like move until the song stops. Because that's the thing about people of color. We have to sometimes connect things in non-traditional ways. So we don't want to just, it's even like spin, right? We don't want to spin. We want to like spin and dance on the bike. We don't want to, I was setting the fight camp thing up, and I was like, oh, can we put 80s hip hop? My husband's like, you trying to, but I was like, I want to make it so that I'm into it, you know.
Definitely. And my mom says she's listening. She says she's watching and listening. So
Tell her to put on the spinners. There's a lot, or if it's not secular music, but the idea of it is that it's almost like musical chairs. You're not going to sit down until the song stops, because that can encourage you, because you might say, like, today is going to be Sam Cooke Day. So today is going to be the Winans, and I'm going to play 8 Winan songs every hour on the hour. But that's one of the ways I've found to do things non-traditionally, just like therapy. So a therapy session with me isn't a traditional setting where you're sitting on the couch and telling me about your childhood. It's very rarely like that. It's a lot more interactive in ways around you and what connects you. So Lowe's, if you were with me, there'd be a lot of sports analogies. I talk to people all the time about sometimes your zone, right? And sometimes we have to work man to man, because there are people that won't understand some of the others, but they understand that, right? If I'm explaining to them that sometimes in a relationship, you might have to use other aspects.
yeah, definitely. And I got a couple of things to read to you. And this is from my wife. It says people sometimes get so caught up with the outward appearance and miss the important part of the person. That's one. And then she said, this pandemic has brought so much trauma and loss. What is some good advice you can give to help people who are struggling with loneliness and separation? And then, of course, my sister-in-law, Dee Dee. Also, the pandemic has increased domestic violence and child abuse, since people are inside longer and more stressed and anxious about finances, as well as being able to interact with others, including family members. The support system and resources and the support has changed.
Yeah. I don't want to miss any points. And so I would ordinarily have taken notes, but I want to talk about the first thing was about the appearances. So one of the things that this is, I'm in, like, my nails look a mess, right? Because you know what I realized? It's not that important for me to go every 2 weeks. What I realized of what is really important is what's actually going on in my home. And that is how, a check-in. And so a couple of things I would ask that people do is that they check in with their loved ones, check in with whether it's your partner. And if you don't have a partner, you check in with a close person that you ask, who are your support people? And as far as your support people, you need to check in with them and what feels good. So I always say, physically seeing people, if you can get them, even your mom, right? My 80-year-old father-in-law, right? He hates FaceTime, but he loves to see his grandkids on FaceTime. Malcolm's dad, he even does, he was a music teacher, and he does trumpet lessons with my middle son on FaceTime. But it's this idea that you can still be connected. So I would say encouraging connections with each other that are non-traditional. As often as we use the computer for work, to the point, I know that your sister-in-law does Zumba, right? I have, but the Zumba, get in that Zumba with your girl, right? On there, right? But all of those things in challenging, keeping each other accountable, but it has to be a consistent connection, right? There are people that I can't go every day without talking to, because seeing them makes me happy. So if you don't have family members that have it, make it so that they can understand what Zoom is, because seeing them and asking them, letting them know you still care about them, but say, can you pray with me? Can you tell me, and this is a big thing, a story about when you first met my dad? Can you tell me a story about what did you think about And this is, you know, for young people to be connected, because I feel like one of the saddest things for me is some of our elders have been so disconnected because the fear that they're going to catch it is so big. So reconnecting with them in non-traditional ways so that they don't feel that you've forgotten about them. The anxiety around what's going to happen, faith is the biggest thing. And I know people are going to be shocked, right? So this idea that this trouble can't last always. This is right now. There's if you had said to anybody this was going to be a year, nobody would believe you. All right, nobody would believe this. But this idea, I play a lot of games, and Lowe's, I'm gonna actually bring one of my favorite things I'm gonna show you. But we do a couple of things, a couple of fun game nights. We do a name that tune. We do a Black cultural trivia. And then we do this sort of scramble within our families once a month for like birthdays. And I have found, so it's a scavenger hunt. I'm giving you a scavenger hunt for the Moore family, right? So let's say it's Losey's birthday and you want, what's his middle name?
Lee.
Oh, I love it, right? So everybody on the Zoom call has to come up with things that begin with LEE and try to find something different, right? So somebody's going to get a leather bag, somebody's going to get lipstick, somebody's going to get a lemon, right? Everybody's going to find E is hard, right? So I don't know as many, an eraser. But you bring them back, and that's one thing around moving. But what I want to say is that we just can't forget about each other. And the part about this is still being able to have fun and finding ways to have fun with each other so that we are not so disconnected.
Well, yeah, I mean, since the pandemic started, we kind of connected. My mom and her sisters, and my brothers and sisters, and brother-in-law, sister. We all on every Saturday for about 2 hours. We played about every game. We're gonna take that scavenger hunt game though. We was trying to find something to do. Name that movie. All kind. We've done every kind of thing you can think of over these last 2-3 months, 4 or 5 months. We didn't do it this week, but I'm sure we're going to be back on next week. But every week we're doing something. So tell me, and I'll have a pop-up guest in a minute once they come back, and so psychotherapy. And,
yeah.
So tell us a little bit about psychotherapy, and we had a little conversation about that. And,
well, yep. So, I'm very candid. I was a person that didn't really believe in it about 10 or 15 years ago. I was probably the same person that was saying, is this for Black people or why? And with the passing, my parents passed a year apart of cancer, and I really felt depressed. I really struggled with finding hope and optimism, and I was at a loss. And I remember going to my regular doctor, like a doctor's visit, and my oldest son was only 3 years old, and she was late, and I started crying, and she said, "Are you okay? I think you need to talk to somebody." And I was like, offended. I really was. I was offended because I had family, I had God, I had church, but I realized I was still really, really struggling. And it was really my first experience of therapy, and I fell in love with it. And I worked through a lot of things while I was there, and then decided this is what I want to do. This is part of what I wanted to do. And then I remember I was working and doing some work with Black young men at the youth shelter. And these Black young men at the youth shelter were talking about traumas and impact of feeling abandoned. And they were talking about their feelings in ways I really had never seen people be vulnerable with. And I decided I wanted to be with people in the room trying to transform their lives in that very intimate way. It really impacted me. I went back to school at NYU, and honestly, I've never really looked back. So for me, doing it differently, and then because I'd always done youth development, whether from teaching, but what I love about therapy, and it's a perfect example, is that it really is going to be different with every person. So it doesn't look the same. Every time I see it shown on TV, a person's on a couch, somebody is taking notes. But a therapy session with me might involve music, might involve prayer, might involve meditation, might involve games. It might involve journal writing, but it really looks different depending upon the person. And that was what was given to me. What do I need? And then what did I want to see happen? And a lot of people are in the Mary J. Blige School of Therapy, right? They all want to be happy, right? I can't sing at all. Otherwise I would sing it for you, right? But you know the song, right? All I really want is to be happy. And what does that look like? Because what looks like happy for Lowe's Moore is not going to be the same as Camille Banks-Lee. It's not going to be the same, right, as your children. And so the first question I ask people is, what brought you here? What are the challenges, or what are the things that we might work on together? It's the very first thing that we talk about. And then sometimes those, I can't help people, because people come in and they say, my mom is dead and I want you to bring her back. I can't do that. I can help you process and grieve and talk about the ways in which, right, that's sort of moved for you. People come in and they'll say, I'm mad about my job, or I didn't get what I thought I was supposed to get. I'm going through a divorce, or I have never been married, or whatever the things are, but it's different for each person. But it's this idea, there's a lot of trust that's involved. There's respect that it's a symbiotic, I'm giving, they're giving. But it's really, I hate to say it, but it is the most meaningful thing I've done. Teaching was good, but there was a curriculum. There were a lot of rules, and there's a lot of rules with therapy as well. Because one of the hardest things about Black people, once you get them, and people of color in general, is that once you engage with them, the biggest problem is they don't understand why they can't call you all the time, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I'll say, I know our session is Mondays at 10:30, Louise. I'm gonna call you Monday at 10, right? She said, I gotta tell you one more thing. And so that's the hardest part. But what I really love, again, is that people get better because they get insight into things they want to change, what they can impact. And then there's two things I always say to people. There's only acceptance and there's change. So we've got to work on the pandemic, right? So we can accept that we can either get the shot or not get the shot, right? Mm-hmm. And so we can either accept that this is what we have and change our behavior, or, right, we're going to have to just sort of deal with whatever we have that's, currently. And I know you're getting a flurry of are you getting questions or?
Well, we're going to pop on, we're going to have a pop on guest. And if you have any questions, it's in there. We get about 20 more minutes to go. And if you have some questions, some other questions, please pop them up on the screen. We'll see them, and then we will address them. But right now, we're going to have a pop-on guest. What?
I miss Camille.
Hi.
So,
La La Land.
Oh yeah, La La Land. Yeah.
This is the thing. I'm texting Camille back and forth, going about coming on the show, when you come on, so forth and so on. The whole time up until this week, right? She thought it was you.
Oh.
It's true.
Yeah, I'm like,
true.
This is Big Lowe's.
Oh, thank you for being willing to come on the show. If I was hosting it, what?
It's true. Well, I have to say, not that I'm not for people in my age range, but I really have a niche with about, my 18 to 35-year-old. And I think it's because I'm like auntie. I always say I'm like the cool auntie, and it's not their mom. So we can talk about a lot of really pressing issues, because with your mom, it's going to be, there's that care, that concern that's a little bit different than that you might share with your auntie. You know what I mean?
So true.
Yeah. So I know, Lozy, you got any thoughts, questions?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I wanted to speak about was I was thinking about kind of growing up in predominantly Black schools. It felt like therapy was always like a punishment for the person who was behaving badly or things of that sort. And I didn't start to think about therapy at all in a positive light until I transferred to Right Country Day School, and I started to see that other kids were talking to the therapists, and like even when they were going through traumatic things in their families, with their families, if they had family members that passed away, or if they experienced any other kind of traumas, there was a space for them to talk. So even though like in my time at Right Country Day, I never felt like I utilized it properly. I was really good, like friend, had a good relationship with the therapist, but I never felt like I used it. And it wasn't until like I was able to name like some of the things like anxiety or stress, but I think that, or the way that stress was affecting me, my body, and my relationships. And I just kind of felt like growing up, I was almost felt like a disadvantage from the very beginning, not having those resources, those conversations, or the terminology to even understand some of the things that I might have been like feeling. So like now as a young adult and trying to be in the in being in the industry and having all of these other experiences, it feels like I'm having to do double work to like kind of like catch up, because my mental health I had put on the back burner for so long. As long as it felt like I looked okay, as long as everyone thought that I was doing well, that it felt like mentally that meant I was okay. And I've been learning during the course of this pandemic and this time with myself that hasn't necessarily always been the case. So
wow. I first of all, I want to congratulate you for saying the most important part. We have to work with younger kids to talk about social emotional regulation from an early age, right? So a kid, you tell somebody no and they're upset or they're frustrated. You said if we could name how we're really feeling at that point, right? But again, I'm gonna give you something to cry about. You better go ahead, right? We weren't culturally ever taught how to be able to talk back, to reflect, to be mindful. And we have very traditional ways in which men were supposed to do things, women were supposed to do things. And you're right, the pandemic is teaching us that all of us are scared. It's not right. We're all scared and learning to be vulnerable. I'm hoping that therapy, because we can now do teletherapy. And so one of the other things, Lowe's, I just want to talk about why many people don't go to therapy is the cost, right? Is the cost. And then something that Taraji talks a lot about is cultural competence. So people always want a Black man. Like I can't tell you the number of times I'm sure this happens to you, Lowe's. People will come and say, my son needs a role model. His father's not in his life. Could you be that? And then they want the therapist to sort of come in and do that same kind of work. And I would say it doesn't necessarily have to be a Black man, but it has to be somebody who speaks language heart to heart that they can feel and the person feels comfortable with. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with it personally. Like even knowing that you're not, I felt feeling embarrassed to have these experiences that so many other people are having. It was just even during this time where I could like talk to my mom or talk to my dad or talk to my grandmother about some of the things that I've been feeling, and them to say, oh, I felt similar to that, or I had this experience where I felt this in my brain. I was like, what? Y'all did such a good job growing up of pretending like nothing was ever wrong. Like I barely ever was able to pinpoint like when they were going through any struggles or any issues. So I never really had the chance to see how they dealt with those things. I was just seeing end result.
Wow. I mean, that's, and Lowe's, I'm going to give you a chance, but I was just saying this to my husband about when we disagree on things, because there are things, shockingly, we do not always agree, right? Discipline and different ways of doing things. And it's important for them to see adults have a disagreement with respect, to talk about collaboration, right? Nobody got punched in the face. Nobody, right? There was no drama, but I was still able to articulate, right? And again, I was a little tougher, right? Because I was a little like, well, I'm the mama, because I could play that card.
Right.
But truthfully, I think you're right around the idea of being vulnerable, and even saying, when my 18-year-old said to me, Mom, I want to go see somebody. I was a little like, well, I'm a therapist, right? Not me. He doesn't want. He wants to go talk about me to somebody else, right? Right. And then I'm gonna tell you what I did, because I want to be honest. I'm not going to a person that's going to charge me $200 an hour, and I need to be real, because I think that's what our people do, right? We're like, well, I'll find it, but who and where and how? So finding a person on your insurance that would be a person that takes your copay, right? Because that does matter. And saying to insurance companies, can you find me somebody who is a Black or who is a person that I feel comfortable with? That's real, because that doesn't happen.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, Lozy and I, and I'm sure Lozy talks to his mom all the time, and he talks to me all the time, and just like he didn't know what we had experienced until we said it, right? We didn't know what he was experiencing, right? And so when he said it, about particular things, we just assumed he loved. Right, and even though he did it well or excellently, we was like, wow, man, great, and everybody's applauding and everything is good. But I never knew what he was experiencing just going through the whole process of being able to do that. Right, and so, man, it made me think differently. Just because we see somebody with this gift, and seems like they are enjoying it and they're impacting people, doesn't mean they're having the same experience or same feeling.
Yeah. And also I think it's just really reassuring, especially now, to feel like we can have a conversation and that your parents are actually listening to you, not hearing what their perception of what you're trying to say or what they think. Because I feel like sometimes it can be downplayed. Oh, you're fine. Like, it's not a big deal. It's either extreme. Are you going to kill yourself? Oh, no, you're not going to kill yourself, then you'll be fine. Like, and it feels like once I got to Right Country Day, too, and I got to see people really like voicing what they're saying, I remember something switched in my brain where I became a little bit more, not argumentative, but I was like, this is how I'm feeling. I don't understand why that's wrong. And I think that there was a lot of pushback between me and my parents initially, because the transition to me having an opinion and feeling like I had like a voice, I felt was very abrupt. I went from being like, oh, I'm okay with anything you say, blah, 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 it's fine, to, well, why do I have to do that? I don't feel that way. Or why do you think that way? The way that you're thinking is harmful, or the way that you're thinking is wrong. And versus like being able to have those conversations now, it's just way different than when they were when I was a kid. So, yeah.
We are evolving. I want to say something. It's really interesting. When I was working in foster care, here was the biggest change. I remember kids, it was maybe 10 years ago, and reality television was on, and it was a reality show. And one of the young ladies said to me, I'm going to come to therapy because I'm trying to remember the show it was. I think it was Love and Hip Hop. But she said she has a therapist, whatever the character, I don't remember the woman's name on the show. But one of the positive things around pop culture is that it's becoming normalized in this idea of being able, so if it's cool, it's almost cool in some ways, right? There's still a stigma around some aspects to therapy, but Lozy, what you're saying around, if you give a kid a voice, right? So even when my son starts saying to me, excuse me, let me say, right? I'm like thinking to myself, oh my God, like his grandmother, he would have been popped in the mouth, right? But I wanted this. I wanted him to have a voice. I wanted him to be able to articulate, to your point, that he didn't agree with everything and the program and the protocol. So we have to accept that the world is evolving, and that particularly with men, and I am sensitive about this in a different way. I think women in our culture, women have talked, right? And women have a coven, and we talk to each other. And sometimes you can't get us to shut up, right? We can go on and on and on about our feelings, right? But getting a man to tell you, because society has said what it looks like, and there's a strong silence in men. So I have to work harder with men in therapy around validating and saying to them, you know, that it's okay. It takes a little bit more work because it really isn't something society is still, 100% on board with. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I agree. When I think about a lot of my resource, it was only until I got to, I think, college where I started to find like guy friends who I felt like were like-minded. But I think that I just have the history of having really strong like woman figures, and even like woman girlfriends that were just supportive, and it made it feel like I was always can have those types of relationships with my close friends without feeling like I would be judged. But in terms of like my family and friends, and I think that there's still an idea that like, men don't cry and men don't like do that things. And, my dad was always really good about telling me that he loves me. But outside of that, I think growing up now, I'm able to have more conversations than I was able to have as a kid, I think, for sure.
Yeah, and I'd like to say too that sometimes, because we mentioned about family and faith earlier, right? And sometimes, we can over spiritualize where we think that, and I believe, of course, I believe in God, and I believe in prayer, right? So I don't want people to take this wrong, right? So some things you can't pray away. When people have addictions and going through grief, sometimes they need help to get through grief. They definitely need help to get through addictions. And so that's where the church can expand. Like my wife's an elder in the church, right? So that's when the church can expand from not just being the spiritual side of it, but also the therapeutic side of it, where people really need help. They need help to deal with what they're thinking with and what they're dealing with the addiction. And so the church can find the balance between what is, you need the mental health, right? And then you need the prayer. I mean, you know, they kind of go coincide and go hand in hand, right? And sometimes you have people who are licensed in the church, social workers in the church, but don't see it as ministry, right? And it should be a part of the ministry. And some things you can make spiritual, and some things that has to be practiced.
You know, part of it is that we often need, you know, like anything else, right? Whether it's a team, and I'm the idea of analogies. So to make a film, you need lots of people, right? The writer, the gaffer, the lighting, there's so many aspects. It's the same thing with all of us in our village around what we're going to need. And so I want us to be more vocal about when do we need it, right? And so when you start having distortions, when it feels escalated, I feel like that we need enough resources where we can be connected and say, when do I call somebody? So, like, you know, Patrice is a perfect example. I had a young woman I'm working with. You know, she's beyond the scope. Her addiction has escalated, and she needs. It's not enough for her to see me once a week for 45 minutes. She needs the monitoring and the involvement of substance use treatment. That's going to be the next level. It's not about me. That's what she needs. And I think you're right in that she's still going to need prayer, right? She's still going to need me, but she needs, what I don't do is check her urine every other day, right? What I don't do is, right, give her group treatment with other people who are in her situation that can, and I'm just saying, you know, if you're a professional actor, you need professional headshots, right? My iPhone is not going to take the shots that you need, Lozy. Am I right?
All right. I mean, some people have not been able to master it, but they usually have a little bit more other things going on in the background.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I will just add that we're at a better place than I ever thought we would be. So we often talk about the negative parts of the pandemic. So some of the positive parts, there have been positive aspects. We're at 500,000 people dead, and really that loss is insurmountable. But I believe it has caused families to reconvene around what's really valued, and to say to people what matters, right? So it doesn't really matter if I don't get my nails done every other week. It doesn't really matter if kids, you know, in terms of social structure, I do think we need each other. That's one of the reasons I enjoy doing things like this, Lowe's, because other people can reach and see this another time. And I'm always extremely transparent that therapy helped my life. I am still currently, and you made a point earlier. So very often as Black people, or Lozy made this point. So we only go when we're in a crisis often, right? If it's like, I gotta go because he broke up with me and I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna commit suicide. I'm at the brink of divorce. But sometimes I'm not at any of that right now. And she helps me with checking my balances. She helps me with understanding, look, a lot of people are stuck in the house with family members, and it's not that great for everybody. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
You know, but I just mean that why it might be helpful is that, you know, you spend 45 to 50 minutes with somebody that's focused specifically on you and your challenges and how they can make you better.
Right.
So we're coming to a close, but we're going to run over by a few minutes because I got a question for you, right? And something that we discussed earlier in regards to being a psychotherapist and the issue of medicine, right? So I want you to answer that in regards to what you do. And you were talking to me about the extreme that ends up in maybe the possibility of medicine.
Yep. So I don't prescribe any medication, right? So the only people that can prescribe medication are an MD, which is a psychiatrist, or a nurse practitioner, or somebody who is specifically licensed. And that is all a psychiatrist or nurse practitioner might do, is regulate you on this medication. And I explain it like this. It is an experiment to see if the interfering problems can stop. So I have thoughts that are happening that are causing me to have disillusions. I see a man and the little red devil is out to get me. And I use this in my personal belief. Medication is used in an extreme case, and it is only used for a short period of time to decrease, right, whatever is interfering with you. So let's say you haven't slept in days, and it is impacting you. You might need to take a medication because without sleep, you can't function properly. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily believe in prescribing medication as antidepressants because it is natural to have peaks and valleys. It is all natural for us to have peaks and valleys. And when you have peaks and valleys, we try to level them out. And how do we level it out? Right? We do talk therapy, and we find other therapeutic ways. The same way I was talking to you about your mom, we try music, exercise, meditation. We try other things, my bubble bath. What are the things that are going to level you from going 0 to 100 real quick, right? So we don't want to take medication ever, right? If I have a headache, my mother used, right? I don't know about everybody else. Go drink some ginger ale, go lay down somewhere, right? My mother used to say, go to the bathroom. I'd be like, what are you talking about, right? Try to go to the bathroom. I'm like, right. But I say that to say, sitting still with things for sometimes about really feeling like what's going on. Because, for example, anxiety mimics a lot of things. People start feeling their heart racing and their chest because they're worried. So when Lozy, when you have an audition, and I don't know if I know I didn't tell you this, but I acted in college, and I love theater, not film and TV. I love theater. But every time I had to audition, and again, I'm a ham, but every time I would feel sweaty, I feel nervous, heart was racing. I'm not going to take any drugs to help me stop heart rate. That is the natural adrenaline, right? And as an athlete, right, before you're going to play that game, you feel these things. Those are natural, God-given sort of indicators of things going on. The same way when you can't sleep at night. We've all had this during this pandemic. And we're laying in bed and we're tossing and we're turning. One of my best things I could offer to people is a weighted blanket. You guys are all going to be like, what are you talking about? So
we have those.
We do. I have one.
Everybody in my family has a weighted blanket because what the weighted blanket does it's proprioceptive, but it creates almost like a hug. Right? So you can't toss and turn. It does the physical job. I don't take and if I do take something, I try to take something very, very natural, but because you create a dependency. So we don't want to take one dependency and create a new one. So I won't say I'm anti-medication, but I really believe strongly in the idea. If you've got enough sleep, if you had enough water, if you did, right, if you get a sleep schedule, you will sleep, right? If you did all the right things and you have a weighted blanket, and if you're still doing that, maybe talk to somebody about it. But, and again, to be fully transparent, I've taken an antidepressant for a short period of time, for a time when I had interfering behaviors that were stopping me from performing my life duties.
Right.
I took those for about 3 months, and my doctor said, "You're doing great. We're going to stop this because it's going to create new problems. If you stay on this, you're going to become dependent. I've gotten you to the point where you've gotten out of your fog, Because depression is like a big fog in your brain. And literally when we look at people's brains, it's really important. So the brain is pink. And when the brain is depressed, it turns gray. And it looks very different. They've done the studies of your brain because it's foggy and it's unclear. You know how to make it unclear? Exercise, get vitamin D, get good rest, listen to music, be positive, be around positive people. I don't mean to make it sound simple, but most of the times when people say, oh, they haven't necessarily tried that with accountability partners. That's one of the reasons why prayer circles work. One of the reasons why, the women I work out with every day, we have to text each other what we did. They want receipts of what I did. I hate doing core. Everybody knows. They're like, Camille, did you do your core? I did not do my core. I did not. And I said, this is why I still look like Winnie the Pooh. But my real point is you need that, just like you need a prayer circle, just like you need, your family that's going to say, well, if you're not feeling good, what are you doing? Have you drank enough water? Like my son that's working, he needed a job because those video games weren't making him feel better. Go be productive and see what it's really, go make some money.
Wow. Well, I see everybody putting up, when's part two? When's part two? But Camille,
I would love to come back because I will say, and really those, both of you, why this is important is because so much of mental work is really a casual exchange, and then it's actually working it, right? Like people want to know, how'd you get better at most of the things you get better at? You keep doing it.
Yeah. And it was interesting. I had Phil Jackson as my guest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one thing, wellness.
Yeah.
He said, he said, I got to come back. We need to talk about wellness, right? Because, he's that whole meditation, spiritual. Yeah. And we need this. We need this now. And so.
Well, yeah. people think like, I'm scared of your wife. They would say, come work out on Sundays. I'd be like, no, I'm not coming here on Sundays. I'm not being tortured, right? That's the funny thing, right? Like the idea, but what it is it's around the idea of a group of like-minded people. And that's the whole idea, whether it's church, it's the idea that we all want to get well. We want to be in a place of balance. We don't want to be out of balance. That's, and I joke about it, but where else are we supposed to, once we're well, you then give it to other people.
Yes. Well, Camille, thank you. I appreciate your time. This has been wonderful.
It's been great.
So let's talk and see whether or not we can do it again.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you
so much, Ms. Camille.
You're welcome. Have a good night. Thank you, Lowe's.
You're welcome. So, thank you, everybody. Thank you for your support this evening. And, I look forward to next week. I have Butch Reynolds on 400-meter world record holder, Olympic gold medalist. And he's on next week. And this is going to be a wonderful time. God bless you all. Have a wonderful and blessed week. No matter what. Here's the scripture for you. I don't know how it's done, but the scripture says, count all things joy, right? Count all things, no matter what you go through. If God wakes you up tomorrow, count all things joy. And for those who are struggling, please be in prayer for those individuals who are experiencing trauma and different things that are happening today. God bless you and good night.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Lowe's More, the BluePrint podcast. Stay connected and follow us at our website, www.lowesmore.com. That's LOWESMOORE.com. You can also join the discussion on Twitter @LowesMoore and on Facebook @LowesMoore Jr. As always, thank you for pushing your mindset towards a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking portion of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast to stay fully up to date with everything we're up to. Until next time, be kind to yourself and each other.
What they teaching is a joke, I ain't buying it like I'm broke.